Hello! So today we are going to spend another day talking a little bit about point slope form and some other things that it's good for. The first thing we're going to talk about is how to make a graph when the equation is written in point slope form. So when you see an equation like this, some of you are thinking, okay, I know how to make a graph. The first thing I'm going to do is get y by itself. If I try to get y by itself here, my first step is going to be to distribute. So I would drop down the y minus 2, and I would get negative 3/5 x minus 12/5. Now those are not super nice numbers, but let's see what happens. Again, I need to get y by itself, so I would add 2 on both sides, which means I would get negative 3/5 x, and when I add 2, I get negative 2/5. These two combine. Now, I don't know about you guys, but graphing this, if I tried to use y equals mx plus b, would be a real challenge because the b here is not a nice number. And it's not even a kind of nice number where there's a 0.5 where it's easy to count on a graph because it's just halfway. It's like a really not nice number. So option 2, which I think is the better option, is to say, you know what? I recognize that this equation is written in point slope form. So that means that if I look at this equation, I should be able to figure out a point that the line goes through and a slope. A point is going to have an x and a y coordinate. So let's see here. The x is always going to be the number that's next to the x. But there's one catch. Do you remember yesterday, and I'm going to pull back out yesterday's notes. Yesterday we said that when you take a negative number and you plug it in, it turns into a positive. When you take a positive number and you plug it in, like this 4, and you plug it in, it stays negative. So positives look like negatives. Negatives look like positives when you write the final equation. That means that even though this looks like a positive 4, it's actually going to be a negative 4. Now the same thing happens with the y. The number that's next to the y looks like a negative 2. So I'm going to change that and I'm going to write down a positive 2. Now let's pause for a second and let's make a note. X and y are always the opposite sign from the equation. So, when I'm asking you to find the ordered pair and you need an x and a y, the x and the y are always the opposite sign of the number that's in the equation. The slope is pretty easy to figure out. The slope would just be the number on the outside of the parentheses. So I would have negative 3/5 as my slope. Now here's how I actually make this graph. I'm going to graph the point that it goes through first. So first, I'm going to graph the point. This point says take 4 steps to the right, then travel to the second floor. So I'm going to put a point there. Now from this first point that I graphed, I'm going to use my slope and I'm going to go down 3, right 5, and put another point. Then I'm going to do it again. This is the second thing. Down 3, right 5. Down 3, right, oh, I ran out of room. Let's try going backwards. Up 3, left 5, oh, I ran out of room. So my last thing that I'm going to do is draw the line. Okay, here's the moral of the story. When you see an equation that's written in point-slope form, do not try to rearrange it and get the y by itself and graph it. It's going to give you ugly numbers. Instead, figure out the point and figure out the slope from this equation, and then use those to make the graph. Let's try it again. Again, I can see here, this is point-slope form. So I'm going to try to figure out the point and the slope. Now, for the point, we know that it's going to be the opposite sign of what I see. It looks like there's a -3 next to the x, so I'm going to write down a +3. It looks like there's a +2 next to the y, so I'm going to write down a -2. And the slope is kind of easier to figure out because it's just the number on the outside of the parentheses. I'm going to graph the point first. So I'm going to go right 3, down 2 spaces, and put a starting point there. Then I'm going to graph the slope. From this starting point, I'm going to rise 2, run 3. Rise 2, run, oh, I'm out of room. Go backwards, down 2, left 3. Down 2, left 3. Down 2, left 3. Then I'm going to draw a line. Let's try this one more time. I can tell from the way the original equation is written that this is point-slope form. So I need to figure out the point and the slope. To get the x value, I just look at the number that's by the x. It looks like a -2, so I'm going to write down a +2. To get the y value, I'm going to look at the number that's by the y. It looks like a -1, so I'm going to write down a +1. And the number on the outside of the parentheses that's invisible would be a -1, which I could write -1/1 to make graphing the slope easier. Now again, the point tells me where to start. So I'm going to start by going right 2 spaces up to the first floor. Now from there, I'm going to go down 1, right 1, down 1, right 1, down 1, right 1, down 1, right 1, down 1, right 1. I could also go backwards, up 1, left 1, up, left, up, left, up, left, up, left, up, left, up, left. Lastly, at the very end, I'm going to connect the dots and I'm going to make a line. Okay, now, there's one other type of problem that you might see when you have point-slope form. Here's what the directions say. Write the equation in point-slope form. Then rearrange to get the equation in slope-intercept form. Basically, if you think back to when we first learned slope-intercept form, and I'm just going to flip back in my notes, we never started with 2 ordered pairs. Because starting with 2 ordered pairs is hard when you're trying to do y equals mx plus b. So if we're starting with 2 ordered pairs, but we want y equals mx plus b as our end goal, we're basically going to do point slope first, and then just start there and rearrange it till we get y equals mx plus b, second. First, we're going to need to know our m. So we're going to calculate 6 minus 4 divided by 17 minus 9. Which gives us 2/8, which reduces to 1/4. Then I'm going to use the first ordered pair and write point slope form. So y minus the y value, which is 4, equals m, which is 1/4, x minus the x value, which is 9. Last but not least, I'm just going to rearrange it. First, I'm going to distribute in order to get rid of the parentheses. So y minus 4 equals 1/4 x minus 9/4. And again, you have a calculator, so don't panic. You guys can do this. Then to get the y by itself, I'm going to add 4 on both sides, which means I get y equals 1/4 x. Negative 9/4 plus 4 would be plus 7/4. And I'm done. Now I have y equals mx plus b, and it wasn't that hard to do. Let's try it one more time. You may remember learning about function notation. In function notation, the number inside the parentheses is the x, the number after the equal sign is the y. Again, the number inside the parentheses is the x, the number outside is the y. So all I'm going to do is rewrite these as two ordered pairs before I try finding the slope. Don't let function notation make you nervous. So I would have, for getting my slope, negative 16 minus negative 8 divided by 7 minus 3. Now minus minus makes a plus, so I would get negative 8 divided by 4, which is negative 2. Now I'm going to write point-slope form using my first point and my slope. So y minus negative 8 becomes plus 8 equals negative 2 parentheses x minus 3. And now I'm going to rearrange. Distribute the negative 2. I get negative 2x plus 6. Subtract the 8 on both sides, and I get y equals negative 2x minus 2. That is it for today. We're done learning about some cool stuff that we can do with point-slope form, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.